next up, we have David H. Lawrence the 17th and Jean-Marc Berne. There's David. There is Jean-Marc. Hi, guys. I guess we'll start with a little introduction. Tell us a little bit about yourselves, how you ended up in voiceover. Yeah, stuff you worked on. We'll start with David.
I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and it's a great place to be from. And I started life loving radio, so I did radio for about 35 years. DJ, talk show host, syndicated host, and about 2003 or so, the weather where I was living in Washington, D.C. became absolutely unbearable. And I thought, you know, maybe with this beautiful face and this amazing physique, I would go to Los Angeles and see if I could be on camera. And it turned out okay for me. So currently I do both on camera and voice work. I teach voice work, and to me, it's all one big thing. There are some people who look at voiceover and on camera work as, you know, divided archipelagos of our business and totally unrelated. And I've always found that, you know, the things that I learned as a voice talent and a radio air personality helped me understand what to do and what not to do on camera. And I found that when I did both, I had better success in the other. So that's where I started. And today I've done about maybe 100 television series on camera, film and television, and do a lot of audiobook work and a lot of other categories of voice work. And of course, as you know, I teach voiceover and on-camera technique here in Los Angeles.
Thank you. Jean-Marc?
Hi, so I had a little bit of a different start with voiceovers. I actually did my first voiceover almost 20 years ago. Shortly after college, I had done a lot of theater in college, and shortly after graduation, someone from the financial aid department reached out to me to do a voiceover. So I did the translation of a financial aid presentation, and then I did the voiceover in Spanish, which was then presented in Dominican Republic. I was not in Dominican Republic, but my voice was. And I am from Dominican Republic. So when I went down 6 months after that presentation, a lot of the people who were at the presentation knew me. And one of the parents went up to me and said, "Hey, that was your voice at the presentation, wasn't it? Now you should do voiceovers." And I didn't think much of it at the time. But then when I came back to New York, I looked more into it and I started getting all this training. I took all these different classes, including animation, commercial work, medical narration, and did all these auditions. And I started getting a lot of great feedback. "Hey, we like your voice, but hey, can you neutralize your accent?" As you can notice, I have a little bit of an accent. My first language is actually Spanish. And so this is as neutral as I get. So I was getting a lot of great auditions and started working with different agents. However, I kept getting questions, "Can you neutralize your accent?" And the thing is, I started in the English market. And what I found was that that was limiting what I was able to get as an actor. And so one of my mentors at the time suggested that I go into the Spanish market. And that's when I met one of my mentors, Manuel Herrera, and started getting that training in Spanish as well. And that's when I started getting a lot more opportunities, because before I was being limited to Yo Quiero Taco Bell in Aeromexico. So that opened the doors to a lot of more opportunities. And one of the things that started opening more doors is being open to different ways. It's not like one direct way. It's like, "Oh yes, I'm gonna do voiceovers and there's just one way to do it." It's a lot of it was, what am I bringing to the table? What are the different things that I am able to do? And how can I serve more? How can I serve myself and more people at the same time? And one of the things that I started realizing is that the more I open myself up to what I do bring to the table, that I speak other languages, that I started getting more opportunities in French as well, because I also am fluent in French, that was opening myself up to other opportunities. And one of the things that happened in the process also was that because I was getting a lot of bilingual projects, I was auditioning both in English and Spanish. And one of the things I noticed was that when I auditioned in English and then I saw the Spanish script, I noticed that there were some mistakes in the scripts. And I also worked as a professional translator. And I mentioned it to the casting director. Hey, I noticed there are some mistakes. Would you like some help in correcting them? And he said, yes. And that's how I became a translator in the project. And the next time they hired me, they also hired me as a Spanish talent. And when I got hired for both, one of the things that happened was there were other characters in Spanish, so there were other actors. And they asked me, it's like, hey, could you direct the other actors? And that's how I became a producer. So ever since then, I started getting hired as a Spanish producer on all these different voiceover projects. And after a while, I started working with all these different actors, and some of these actors came to me and I was like, hey, would you coach me? And that's how I became a voiceover coach. So I was working with some of my mentors. I got a lot of guidance, and actually Paul is one of my mentors. I'm on the list of great mentors that I got to work with. And that's actually how I got to work with one of my friends who's a sound designer. And I was coming out of a meeting with him. His name is Mark Baserman, great sound designer. And he was working out of Big Yellow Duck at the time. And they were doing the casting for the Octonauts that, as you know, they're being aired on the Disney Channel. And when I came out of the meeting, I told Mark, hey, do you think you can get me in there? And so he talked to the casting director, and the casting director said, hey, Jean-Marc, yes, of course, come on in. So I auditioned. I did not get the part, but I did tell the casting director, hey, they were looking for a Latino penguin. And I let them know, listen, I am connected to a lot of the Latino actors. I would be happy to recommend some of my guys. And one of my guys did actually make it to the callbacks. And however, he didn't have quite the accent, the right accent. So they called me again and said, hey, Jean-Marc, your guy is great, but we need help with getting the right accent for the actor. Do you think you can coach him? And that's how I became the voiceover coach for the animated series, The Octonauts.
Amazing. And jumping off the idea of opportunities for bilingual actors, what have you both seen in terms of changes in diversity for the industry, in terms of opportunities available? There's a lot of animation shows have been making the headlines for actors stepping down. David, is there a difference in roles that maybe you would have gotten an audition for now people are saying, hey, let's have this actor who is this ethnicity play this, or have somebody who is more closely related to this than you are?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to say in this space other than when Jean-Marc said, yo quiero Taco Bell, and I thought to myself, well, that's Carlos Alazraqui who did that voice. I don't know whether he would have gotten the audition for it today. I don't think Carlos is Hispanic, but I don't know for sure. But maybe he is, I don't know. But I think there certainly is a more, instead of tone deaf, tone hearing when it comes to the idea of matching. I think I saw Zoe Saldana the other day get so precise with the idea that she didn't, when she looks back on it, she shouldn't have played Nina Simone. And I was watching it, I'm like, God, I don't know if I'd get that precise about these things, but I understand that it's a very sensitive issue these days, and I would think that Jean-Marc has more to say about it than I do.
Yes, so thank you, David. Actually, one of the things that I am seeing, there's a lot more sensitivity to the subject, with a lot of more, with all the different movements and different organizations that are pro diversity. Like with the Hispanics, you have the Hispanic Organization of Latin Actors. and people are more aware, like with the Black Lives Matter movement, there's a lot more talk about it and a lot more openness, and people being proactive about making sure that there is diversity being represented, not just on TV, but also in animation. Like you have shows like Maya and Miguel, you have Dora the Explorer, you have a lot of different shows that are being targeted towards the Hispanic audience or the African American audience, and being really sensitive to representing those characters well, and making sure that the actors who are involved in those shows really are that particular ethnicity, and being sensitive to that, and the veracity, and even speaking to bringing the characters to life, and like what the characters need, and what the casting directors are asking from actors. One of the things that is always a very sensitive subject is getting into the specs, how the character is described. Like you can't say Hispanic and think, okay, there's just one Hispanic, maybe from El Salvador, Ecuador, or Argentina, and we all have different accents. And that's part of the challenge in coming up with a character. And actually, in part of the process of the Octonauts, I was involved in the creation of the voice for Peso, the Latino penguin, in the Octonauts. So one of the discussions was that this show had a lot of success in Europe, and then we were doing the ADR for it. We were Americanizing the voices on the show. And one of the things that the original creator, Naomi, wanted for the show was a Latino penguin, and in Europe they did not have that. And I said to myself, really, there are not enough Spaniards in Spain? And in coming up with the accent in here for the US, one of the discussions was like, well, where should this penguin come from? And there were a lot of the talk was, it's like, well, we know there are penguins in Argentina. Should it be an Argentinian accent? And one of the things that I was educating the rest of the cast, the crew, was like, no, Argentinian accent would not work, because one of the things about the Argentinian accent, as what we know as a Argentinian accent, which is actually like Buenos Aires, it sounds a lot like the Italian lilt. So it would be confusing to the audience. And one of the things that was also discussed, well, could it be Mexican? It was like, Mexican, well, no, there are no penguins in Mexico, and it doesn't make sense. And when we discussed, well, there are also penguins in Ecuador, and Ecuador has more of a neutral Latino accent, which would be like a pan-Latino accent, which would work well. And that's how we arrived to the actual accent for Peso.
My next question is, we are in the middle of a pandemic, and the unique thing about voiceover is that a lot of voice actors have already been set up to be able to work from home and have their own studios. Wondering if you could speak to that, and the sort of diversity in voiceover in terms of where and how you work from, and how that sort of opens more doors, and in a lot of ways, I think, makes voiceover more accessible with less gatekeepers.
Sure. Well, I do pretty much all of my work from home, even when there wasn't a pandemic. I like to tell my friends, I'm not really having much challenge here with this time that we're having, because I've been sheltering in place and social distancing for about 35 years. So I don't see much difference. And in fact, on the on-camera side of things, I was lucky enough to be one of the first actors back to work. I worked a show called Bold and the Beautiful, which I know nobody here watches, but it's okay. My mom thinks I finally made it in show business. We were back to work a couple weeks ago, and the new protocols are amazing. And they're keeping us all safe, and it's part of the union and the production companies work together to do that. From testing to temperature checks to masks to distancing and shields and mannequins and dolls and creative editing techniques. with voice work, as you know, Dara, we do almost everything from home now anyway. In fact, in the early 2000s, when I first came to Los Angeles, I had already been doing work from home in Washington, D.C., and in New York and in Cleveland. And my agent here just wasn't used to that. She wanted me to drive from where I lived in Burbank to where her agency was in Beverly Hills. And that's either a 40-minute drive or a 3-hour drive, depending upon the traffic. And one day there were mudslides or something. I said, please just let me do this from home. I have great equipment. I have a beautiful space that I record in. And she's, no, no, we have an engineer here. And I said, I can't get there. Would you just give me the opportunity? And I sent her the audition and she called me 10 minutes later and she's like, how do you get your mic to sound like that? That sounds awesome. And that was kind of the turning point in doing work from home. These days, when I get auditions, if it wasn't a pandemic, I would be very surprised if they said, go to a studio to do the audition. It's almost always they'll send you a PDF or a Word file. You send them back an MP3, and even the work happens from home. I'm on the SAG-AFTRA voiceover committee, and right now we're finalizing the voiceover version of Safer Moving Forward, or Safeway Forward is the name of the plan, and it's about how to keep voice actors, and there's a lot less work keeping voice actors safe if they're in their house. So yeah, I mean, this microphone that I use, I'm not using it right now, I'm using my video mic, but I can switch to it. This microphone is what I use at home. Let me just switch real quick to it. You can hear the difference. So now it sounds very different and more full and rich and vibrant. People don't expect to have the same kind of quality of audio when you're just doing video, but when you're doing voiceover work, you have to have a better mic. And this is the mic that I recommend for people when they're just getting started. I don't want them to overspend, and it works great in a home environment that isn't completely soundproof. So yes, yes, and maybe were, I guess, the answers to your question.
Yeah, and I'll say I use that same mic. I use that same sock on my mic. Someone's asking what mic it is. It's the Audio-Technica 2020 USB Plus. And yeah. I know David uses it for his projects and has fools engineers who all the time think it's a more expensive mic.
Yeah, there are people, and you should avoid USB mics without fail, except for that one, because it happens to use the same electronics in the mic itself that are used in high-end bridges and interfaces that a studio mic would plug into.
We have a question about how competitive can voiceover be working in television and in film, and I guess follow-up would be how do you think about the competitive nature of it? How do you get past that and allow yourself to not feel like you're competing with thousands of others?
I don't look at it as a competition. Yeah. It's not a race. And also, I don't know how Jean-Marc feels about it, but voiceover has so many more opportunities than on camera. I mean, think about just the local commercials that are being produced by radio stations in every market across the country. The regional spots, the statewide spots, the time zone spots, if that company has, like, I love Culver's hamburgers. They're not in the West, but I have done spots for companies that are only regional. And so you think about that and the national work and the syndicated work, there are thousands of opportunities in voiceover every day. And that doesn't even count, that's just commercials. That doesn't count audiobooks, it doesn't count IVR, it doesn't count all these other categories of voice work. So I don't look at it as a competition. It also means there are a lot more people vying for that work. But again, that's not how I look at things. When I heard Paul talk about you know, how he looks at play and production and creativity. And what I heard earlier from you talking about how you are enough, that kind of sounds familiar to me. I don't know how that is, but it's really important to understand that you're running your own race. You're running your own jog or walk or crawl or whatever it is. And the pace is going to change as you go down the path in your journey. Your rules are going to change. A lot of things are going to change, but it's really important for you to understand that you don't have to put on a better version of yourself. You are enough, and everything that you need, you have built inside you with your life experience. Yeah, so Jean, I don't want to monopolize. Go for it.
No, that's great. I agree with what David said. I don't see it as a competition either. I think of it more as how can you be competitive yourself? You get the training, you prepare yourself, you have to hone your craft. You also have to understand the market. How do you want to brand yourself? Where do you fit in the market? And when you understand what you bring to the table, and that's what's going to make a big difference in what you do and how you approach things. Like, for example, nowadays, this is a global market. Like David said, we can work from home. And being an international talent myself, I look at this as I have clients in West Africa, in Paris, France, London, Australia, in the Philippines and Malaysia. And that's because I've opened myself up to all these different markets. Like right now, we have animations coming out of all these places, out of India, Japan, the Philippines. You have Canada is doing a lot of different animation. So it's not just animation here in the US, there's animation coming out of Argentina. And it's a lot of it is knowing what is out there and opening yourself up to all these opportunities. And if you have more than one language, that you let people know about it and train yourself so that you really understand what are some of the expectations from you as a talent in the market, and also preparing yourself at home. I think one of the big things, one of the big shifts that have happened, even though as voiceover talent, we pretty much always, well, ever since I started anyway, that it was expected for you to have a home studio, that at the very least that you would be able to audition from home. Now the expectation is that you have a broadcast quality studio, that you are able to even produce audiobooks, because it's another level of broadcast quality or recording quality that is expected when you have certain projects that you need to produce from home.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing. I see a lot of the specs, a lot of the castings that are coming from agents is, well, we want the talent to have open source. Source Connect.
Yeah.
Is one of the words that keeps coming up. Source Connect.
I keep pushing back on that, because you don't need Source Connect. You can use Clean Feed, you can use 100 other things, but Source Connect has done a really good job of scaring the agents and the producers and the engineers into using their product. And it's a personal bugaboo of mine, but you do have to have that connectivity in some way. Yeah.
Hi, guys, thank you. Actually, and this is the kind of conversation we love, where we can have this kind of like, I think this, I think that. I just want to jump in and say that it looks like we've lost Dara just for a little while. So I am here, and I wonder if this would be an okay time to amplify some of the voices we're getting in our Q&A for both of you. To just shift a little bit and perhaps to get a couple of steps back, our participants are really curious to know about some of the projects you've worked on, including questions about some of your favorites. So I wonder if we could hear perhaps from you, David, and then you, Jean-Marc, just to locate yourselves in some of the breadth of your work.
So I worked on Cars 3. I was the track announcer on Cars 3. I worked on a video game called Saints Row, the very first edition, where I did 64 of the voices in the game. I've worked on a lot of things, 200 audiobooks, ADR for about 50 films, lots of commercials. I don't have a favorite. I mean, one of the on-camera gigs, the very first one actually that I got, was a television show called Heroes, where I played one of the really creepy evil villains for 3 seasons. And I really loved doing the on-camera work, but I also loved going into the studio and doing the ADR work, you know. If I'm being thrown through the air by Siler, you know, I get to go into the ADR studio and go, ah, you know, and make that noise. You know, I wish I had a favorite. I mean, I love everything I do. And if you can find joy in all of the things that you do, you're so far ahead of the game.
Oh, that's lovely. And it really connects to what Dara was saying before about, as actors, being able to find as many experiences as we can so that we have that lived experience to infuse into the work and find that joy, right? Like find the sense of like, it's not so much a favorite, it's just where I am now and I'm enjoying it. That's beautiful.
Yep.
And how about you, Jean-Marc?
Well, for me, having done a lot of audiobook work, one of my favorite was working on La Fiesta del Chivo in Spanish, and it's literally it's Mario Vargas Llosa, the famous Pulitzer Prize winner, and working on all those different characters, including Trujillo, the dictator from the Dominican Republic. That was really big for me because the story is based on the Dominican Republic, and I got to voice all these different characters, and having to come up with all these character voices and understanding their background and telling their story was really special for me because I'm a Haitian Dominican American, so I got to tap on all those things, and Trujillo was actually the dictator who did the genocide in the Dominican Republic of all the Haitians in the Dominican Republic. So it was really interesting for me to voice that. And in terms of favorite project, I would say probably, yeah, definitely working on the Octonauts, working for 5 seasons with the crew, and it was really an amazing ride because every day I felt like I came to play, and I got to learn so much from the show. It's like Star Trek for kids under the sea with cute little penguins and animals. And I got to learn what a narwhal was. I didn't know narwhals existed. Was it a whale with a unicorn? What is that? I was always learning something new, and I felt like a little kid in a playroom. And okay, what are we gonna play with today? And I thought that we're working on the Nintendo video games also, because I was a Spanish voice for several years, and I got to do it's like, oh, okay, you press the A button, and this is how you speed up. And then doing that plus doing all the different characters was also fun, shifting, wearing all these different hats.
Definitely. And I imagine in our audience right now, we're having people starting to be like, oh, that's what you're from, because I think your voices sound familiar to so many of us. And it connects to a question from Sadia, who wonders if you enjoy the anonymity that you receive from being someone who typically is behind the character and not as much in front of the screen, that we know you've done screen work. Yeah, what thoughts about that? This idea of, do you walk into a restaurant and you say your name and people are like, I know you, or I've seen you on Heroes, or if you have more of a private ability to live more of a private life, despite having had such a huge canon of work and voice in the world, because people are less likely to notice you in person.
When I walk into a restaurant, I'm usually like, I just kind of get a table for 4. Of course, Mr. Giamatti, we'd love to have you. You know, happen in Vegas, but you know, the notion of anonymity to me is something that I don't know that I've experienced it or not experienced it. I used to be the voice of America Online's tech support lines for 28 years. If you called up America Online back when it was really the bomb, 4.5 million times a day, people were looking for tech support, and I was the voice of their recorded phone line. And one day in a restaurant in DC, I was talking with a friend, and the woman behind me turns around. She goes, "Are you that guy on AOL? Are you that guy on AOL? Because you know," and I'm like, "Yes." She goes, "I hate you." So there was this, you know, I guess there was something there, but I'm not, like, very rarely does something happen. I was at Dragon Con, and a woman wouldn't come up to my table for an autograph because she thought I was way too scary. And I'm like, that's my character. That's not me. I'm a nice guy. I give hugs and stuff, you know? So, yeah. So that's been my experience. You know, I've never had any issues with it.
Well, my experience is mostly in voiceovers, so, and very little on camera work. So I've been pretty anonymous, and I'm okay with that. Except for people who have taken classes maybe at Actors Connection. It's like, oh, I've seen your face at Actors Connection, or oh, you're giving class at HB Studio. But other than that, I'm okay with that.
Right, absolutely. we're going to wrap up in just a few moments. I'm so struck by how swiftly that time went by. I think I can speak for most of us here today that we could listen to you both and Paul and Dara speak all day. I wonder if you can close us out with, we have some questions about how you get started, you know, and I know we got to hear a little bit about how you got started, but you're in the chair of, you know, someone who has that wisdom. And I wonder if you can each take a moment to share what advice you would give for those of us who are interested in starting off on a career in voice acting.
Well, this is such an important thing that I actually created a free class around it. And I'm going to ask your permission if I could put a link in the chat. I don't know if I can.
Absolutely.
But this is what I just put in the chat is a free online course called How to Get Started in VoiceOver, Getting Started in VoiceOver. I think that people walk into this space and they think, how hard could this be, right? You just talk into a microphone out, you know. They get bad advice on what equipment to get. They get bad advice on how the business works, how the deal flow and the workflow of the business works. They get sometimes well-meaning, but bad advice from people who have tried it and not done so well at it, maybe haven't had the success that they want. And this class sort of like encompasses all of the questions that I've gotten over the last 40 years about how do I do what you do, you know? Everybody tells me I have a great voice when they talk to me on the phone, or my kids love when I read them stories at night, the crazy voices that I make. I think I'd be great on cartoons. And I have to disabuse them of the notion that cartoons are even on Saturday morning anymore. But there's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of great, I try to catch people as quickly as I can when they first want to start doing this, so that I can save them the time and trouble of the misinformation that they're going to get. I don't know whether you, Jean-Marc, have had people come to you and say, well, all I really need is a demo and an agent, right? That's all I really need. So can you just help me do that? How many times has that happened to you?
All the time. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I tell people, it's like, well, if you're going to go into the business, you really need to prepare yourself, hone your craft, really study the technique, and prepare yourself. And even before making your first demo, really understand what's it going to take for me to have a career in this. And so it's not just about honing your craft, but also understanding the business and how you're going to market yourself. Where do I fit in this? What's my brand? And I actually teach a whole class on just branding and how to market yourself as a voiceover actor. So one of the things that I teach is power marketing for the voiceover actor, and really looking at the different strategies of how to get started. And the first thing I always say, work on your technique, work on your craft.
Yeah.
Before getting an agent, before working on a demo, it's not enough just to have a good voice. We're not voices in a vacuum. You really need to study the craft to bring all these characters to life.
Yeah.
And if I may, one of the things that I also wanted to share was I have a free Power Up Your Voiceover community Facebook group that I'd like to share with attendees.
This is fantastic. And just so everybody in our audience knows, we will take these links and we will also post them on our website as resources for you so you can return to them, because there's just so much here that I wish we could continue to explore, but time has done its warped thing and flown on by. Here we are. So I do want to thank you both so much, and our audience, for sticking with us. We ended a little early last week. We're ending a little late this week, so it all comes out somewhere in the wash. David, Jean-Marc, Paul, thank you so much. I want to pass it back over right now to our co-hosts to wrap us up. Thank you.